Chaos isn't knocking, it's barging in. Iran's rockets screamed across the sky, and Israeli sirens answered in kind. The world is watching, hearts pounding, as this new barrage sparks fear and fury. What happens next? That's where everything changes. Stay with me till the end, because the final piece will leave you breathless. In the grand, often turbulent chronicle of nations, there exist enmities so deeply rooted, so entangled in the soil of history, ideology, and perceived existential threat that they smolder for decades, punctuated by shadow skirmishes and fiery rhetoric, always threatening to erupt into open conflagration. Such is the tragic and complex relationship between Iran and Israel. To understand what is happening now, the chilling wail of air raid sirens that, even as recently as early this Monday morning, tore through the dawn across northern, central, and southern Israel, the incoming streaks of fire from yet another barrage of Iranian ballistic missiles, the nationwide orders for citizens to seek immediate shelter, we must acknowledge that this is not an isolated storm. It is rather the violent manifestation of a long, bitter winter, a shadow war waged with varying intensity since Iran's 1979 Islamic Revolution. That revolution didn't just transform Iran, it radically reconfigured the geopolitical landscape, setting Tehran on a collision course with an Israel that viewed this new Islamic Republic as an implacable adversary. For over 4 decades, this conflict largely played out covertly. Sophisticated cyber attacks, precision assassinations, and proxy-driven conflicts. Each incident added another layer of mistrust. This long preamble is crucial, for this fresh, calculated barrage, which Iran itself describes as a tactical shift, striking Israel yet again, is the terrifying, real-time consequence of this deeply entrenched animosity bursting, repeatedly, into open, devastating flame. The sirens are not a memory. They are a current, horrifying soundtrack to an escalating crisis. Fractured calm. The fragile, illusory calm that periodically settled over this decades-long shadow war was violently shattered following the events of October 2023. Hamas's attack on Israel, an act Iran backed via its proxy forces, prompted Israel to intensify its own covert campaign, leading to a perilous escalation. This culminated on June 13, 2025, with Israel's Operation Rising Lion, a bold aerial offensive targeting Iranian nuclear and military infrastructure, reportedly killing top IRGC and nuclear scientists and employing Mossad-driven sabotage to disable air defenses. This act transformed the shadow war into open conflict. The repercussions are now being felt with brutal, recurrent immediacy. Early this Monday morning, even as citizens attempted to start their week, Iran launched another significant barrage of 9 to 10 ballistic missiles across a wide swath of Israeli territory. This was not a localized event. Air raid sirens blared for over 20 to 30 excruciating minutes, their terrifying call echoing through diverse areas including the ancient city of Jerusalem, the bustling metropolis of Tel Aviv, the vast Negev desert in the south, and the crucial port city of Ashdod. Nationwide shelter-in-place orders were issued, a stark reminder that no part of the country is beyond the reach of this conflict. This sustained alarm, the sheer geographical breadth of the targeted zones, signals a deliberate Iranian strategy, a tactical shift, as Tehran itself has reportedly characterized it, away from singular massive salvos towards repeated, pressure-based retaliatory strikes. The aim, it seems, is to maintain relentless psychological and strategic pressure on Israel to demonstrate an enduring capacity to strike and to respond to the earlier U.S. and Israeli strikes on Iranian nuclear and regime sites that have defined this current phase of intense conflict since mid-June. The night, and now the dawn, are no longer peaceful interludes, but anxious vigils under the threat of renewed attack. Retaliatory fury. The fury from Tehran, a direct consequence of Operation Rising Lion, and the subsequent American strikes on Iranian nuclear sites like Fordow, Isfahan, and Natanz on June 22 is now manifesting as a persistent, calculated campaign of direct missile assaults. This latest barrage early Monday morning is a clear enactment of Iran's vow to retaliate and its new strategy of sustained pressure. While the Israel Defense Forces (IDF) report that most of these 9 to 10 ballistic missiles were successfully intercepted by Israel's sophisticated multi-layered air defense network, the sheer intensity and breadth of the attack ensure that the threat remains acute. Critically, at least one missile from this latest wave is reported to have struck a strategic infrastructure site near the southern port city of Ashdod. The impact was significant enough to temporarily knock out power for approximately 8,000 Israelis in the southern region, a tangible disruption to civilian life and a clear indicator that even with high interception rates, damage and disruption are still occurring. While thankfully no fatalities have been confirmed from this specific morning attack, the human cost is still present. Some civilians sustained minor injuries, not from direct missile hits, but from the panicked rush to shelters or from falling debris dislodged by nearby impacts or interceptor explosions. Beyond the power outage, structural damage has been reported to electrical infrastructure and some residential areas, though emergency services are reportedly controlling the immediate situations. Each missile launched is a testament to Iran's determination to exact a price, a violent expression of its new doctrine of continuous, targeted retaliation. This isn't just about military targets. It's about making the cost of conflict profoundly felt across Israeli society, ensuring that the tension from the ongoing war, ignited on June 13, remains palpable and unceasing. Widening vortex. The conflict, already broadened by the direct U.S. strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities, now deepens and intensifies with this new, explicitly tactical Iranian missile campaign against Israel. As sirens blare with renewed frequency, the vortex of violence pulls the region further into chaos. The U.S. intervention on June 22 had already transformed the conflict. Now, with Iran adopting a strategy of repeated, calibrated missile strikes rather than one-off salvos, the potential for further U.S. involvement becomes even more acute. Washington will be assessing this tactical shift, the damage inflicted, such as the Ashdod power outage, and Iran's demonstrated capability to sustain such pressure. The scope of previous Israeli strikes had been extensive. This new phase of sustained Iranian missile attacks will undoubtedly add to the pressures on the Israeli government for an even more forceful counter-response. Israel is now expected to respond to this latest barrage with its own precise airstrikes on Iranian military infrastructure, possibly deep inside Iran, perpetuating the retaliation chain. The civilian populations in both nations remain on edge. The regular alerts and shelter-in-place orders in Israel highlight that continued public safety measures are a grim necessity. This ongoing missile assault demonstrates that despite any proxy fatigue that might be affecting groups like Hezbollah or Hamas, Iran retains the capacity and the will for direct strategic state-on-state attacks, now framed as a continuous pressure campaign. The crucial question is how far this retaliatory cycle, marked by tactical shifts and sustained aggression, will spin. Will the U.S. feel compelled to intervene further? Will Israel's expected response escalate the conflict to yet another, more dangerous level? The repeated sound of sirens is a constant alarm, signaling a perilous descent into wider, more intractable war. Fraying alliances. Iran's ability to launch these repeated barrages of ballistic missiles directly at Israel, even as it describes this as a tactical shift toward sustained pressure, underscores its reliance on indigenous capabilities. While the axis of resistance, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, may be showing signs of caution or proxy fatigue due to past losses and current pressures, Iran itself clearly maintains and is willing to utilize its sovereign military assets for direct strikes. This latest attack, targeting northern, central, and southern Israel, causing power outages and widespread fear, is a testament to this independent capacity. The strategic shift towards ongoing calibrated attacks rather than single massive salvos suggests a long-term plan to wear down Israeli defenses, disrupt civilian life, and maintain a constant state of anxiety, perhaps compensating for any diminished capacity to open multiple fronts through proxies. This forces Israeli and American strategic calculations to focus even more intently on Iran's internal missile production, launch capabilities, and command structures. The ongoing nature of these attacks also poses a significant challenge to Israel's air defense systems, which, while highly effective, are being subjected to repeated, sustained testing. The IDF's report that most missiles were intercepted in this latest barrage is a credit to that system, but the strike near Ashdod proves that penetrations are still possible and can cause significant disruption. This sustained missile pressure from Iran, even if its proxies are less active, keeps the conflict at a high intensity and ensures that the diplomatic and military focus remains squarely on the direct Iran-Israel, and by extension, US-Iran confrontation. The battlefield is less diffuse, more concentrated between the primary state actors, making each direct exchange potentially more consequential. Strategic calculus. The strategic calculus for both Iran and Israel is now defined by this new Iranian doctrine of sustained, pressure-based retaliation. For Israel, its goals of degrading Iran's nuclear program and missile capabilities remain paramount. This latest barrage, and Iran's stated tactical shift, presents a new challenge: how to counter an adversary committed to ongoing repeated strikes designed to inflict persistent, albeit perhaps individually limited, damage and disruption. Israel is now expected to respond with its own precise airstrikes, possibly targeting not just launch sites but also the command and control infrastructure behind this sustained campaign, potentially venturing deeper into Iranian territory. The aim will be to break this new pattern of Iranian aggression and re-establish a more favorable deterrent posture. The temporary power outage near Ashdod, affecting 8,000 people, though not catastrophic in terms of casualties, serves as a clear example of the kind of disruptive impact Iran aims for with this strategy. For Iran, this tactical shift allows it to maintain pressure on Israel to respond to the earlier US and Israeli strikes on its nuclear and regime sites, and to project an image of enduring resolve without necessarily expending its entire missile arsenal in a single, massive exchange. It's a strategy of persistent harassment, psychological warfare, and calibrated escalation. Each smaller targeted barrage forces Israel to activate its defenses, sends its population to shelters, and reminds the world of the ongoing conflict. However, this approach also continuously risks Israeli counter-retaliation and further international condemnation. Global calls for de-escalation are growing louder as this pattern of violence continues, especially given the clear and repeated risk to civilian populations on both sides. The power outage in southern Israel is a concrete example of the civilian impact that is fueling this diplomatic pressure. The conflict remains dangerously volatile, with each side adapting its strategy in a deadly, ongoing chess game. Global ripples. This new Iranian strategy of sustained, calibrated missile pressure against Israel, as evidenced by the early Monday barrage across widespread Israeli territory, including Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, sends fresh and intensified shockwaves globally. The immediate images of sirens, citizens rushing to shelters, and reports of strikes like the one near Ashdod knocking out power make the conflict starkly real. Concerns about a wider regional war, already acute since the Israeli Operation Rising Lion and the direct U.S. strikes on Iranian nuclear sites, are amplified. Each new Iranian barrage and Israel's expected precise counter-airstrikes, potentially deep inside Iran, raises the risk of miscalculation or an unintended escalation that could draw in other regional and global powers more deeply. The impact on civilian life is a growing concern. The constant alerts, the need for public safety measures, the minor injuries sustained even when fatalities are avoided, and the disruption to infrastructure like the Ashdod power grid highlight the continuous human cost. This sustained state of conflict places immense strain on populations and economies. Diplomatically, the pressure mounts. Global calls for de-escalation will undoubtedly grow louder as the violence continues with no clear end in sight. The tactical shift by Iran towards repeated strikes suggests a long-haul confrontation rather than a quick, decisive exchange, making the search for diplomatic off-ramps both more urgent and more challenging. The international community, while calling for restraint, faces the difficult task of influencing actors locked in a cycle of attack and counterattack, each believing their actions are justified and necessary. The stability of the entire Middle East remains profoundly threatened, with every missile launch potentially pushing the region closer to a broader conflagration. Crossroads ahead. As Iran commits to this new strategy of sustained missile pressure, evidenced by the multi-pronged barrage early Monday, and Israel prepares its inevitable counter-response, the region stands at a critical, exceedingly dangerous crossroads. The immediate future will be shaped by the frequency and intensity of these Iranian attacks and the nature of Israeli retaliation. Will Israel's expected precise airstrikes on Iranian military infrastructure, possibly deep inside Iran, succeed in deterring Tehran, or will they merely fuel another round in this escalating cycle? Civilian preparedness in Israel, already high, will become an even more entrenched aspect of daily life, with continued public safety measures and the psychological toll of regular alerts. The damage to infrastructure, like the power outage near Ashdod, demonstrates that even with robust defenses, these attacks have tangible consequences. Iran's ability to sustain this tactical shift will depend on its remaining missile inventories and production capabilities. Each barrage tests not only Israeli defenses, but also Iran's own logistical and material endurance. The role of the United States remains pivotal. Will Washington increase its direct support for Israeli offensive or defensive operations, or will it prioritize leading a concerted international effort to impose a ceasefire and force a return to some form of dialogue, however improbable that seems amidst active missile exchanges? The key takeaway is that this conflict is not de-escalating. It is evolving into a pattern of continuous, calibrated aggression. The primary watchpoint is the retaliation chain. Can it be broken, or is the region doomed to an ever-escalating series of strikes and counterstrikes? The window for diplomacy shrinks with every siren, with every explosion, with every fresh report of damage and disruption. The sky over Israel, pierced again by Iranian missiles this Monday morning, serves as a stark testament to a conflict that has moved far beyond shadows into a terrifying reality of recurrent, direct attack. This declared tactical shift by Iran towards sustained, pressure-based retaliation signals not an end, but a grim continuation of hostilities. While Israel's formidable defenses intercept many threats, the strike near Ashdod and the widespread disruption prove that the danger is persistent and the impact on civilian life undeniable. As global calls for de-escalation intensify against the backdrop of ongoing violence and civilian risk, the question of whether this perilous cycle can be broken or if it will spiral into an even more devastating regional war hangs heavy, a profound concern for a world watching with growing alarm. The future remains volatile, etched in the contrails of missiles and the anxious vigilance of nations on edge. In these harrowing times, as communities endure the trauma of repeated attacks and the constant threat of violence, the human cost of this conflict becomes achingly clear. It is measured not just in casualties or damaged infrastructure, but in the pervasive fear, the disrupted lives, and the dimming hope for a peaceful tomorrow. The path away from this precipice requires more than military might or strategic acumen. It demands a courageous, concerted effort to rediscover avenues for dialogue, to prioritize human security above all, and to break the devastating cycle of retribution. This is the urgent, perhaps paramount challenge of our time.